She saved a stranger on the street, but never imagined he was a billionaire CEO looking for love. Hello, let's start another beautiful story. Welcome to my channel. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Let's go. The fluorescent lights of Pete's 24-hour diner buzzed overhead as Madison Carter wiped down the counter for what felt like the 100th time that night. The sound, mixed with the gentle patter of rain against the windows, creating a melancholic symphony that matched her mood. Her fingers traced over the eviction notice folded in her apron pocket. 3 days left to come up with the rent, or she'd lose the only home she had left. "Order up!" Randy, the night cook, called from the kitchen window, sliding a plate of eggs and hash browns onto the counter. Madison grabbed it, mustering a smile she didn't feel as she served the lone trucker, hunched over his coffee at the far end of the counter. The diner sat in one of Boston's forgotten corners, where the gleaming financial district faded into shadowy streets lined with shuttered storefronts and graffiti-covered walls. It wasn't much, but it had been her anchor these past few months. Since her mother's passing, the medical bills had drained what little savings they had, leaving Madison with nothing but memories and mounting debt. She glanced at the clock, 2:37 a.m. The graveyard shift dragged on, each minute a reminder of how far she'd fallen from the life she'd once imagined for herself. College dreams had evaporated in the face of her mother's illness, replaced by double shifts and endless cups of coffee. The bell above the door chimed, and Madison turned, expecting another late-night regular. Instead, the sight before her made her heart skip. A man stumbled in, drenched from the rain, his expensive suit muddied and torn. Blood trickled from a cut above his eye, and his movements were unsteady, almost desperate. "Sir?" Madison rushed forward as he swayed dangerously. "Are you all right?" His eyes met hers, and something in them struck her. Not just pain or confusion, but a profound loss, as if he'd seen something that had shattered his world. Before he could answer, his knees buckled. Madison caught him before he hit the floor, surprising herself with her strength. "Randy, call an ambulance." "No!" The man's voice was barely a whisper, his fingers clutching her arm. "No hospitals, please." She should have insisted, should have called 911 anyway, but something in his plea resonated with her. She recognized the look of someone who had nowhere else to turn. Hadn't she worn that same expression in the mirror countless times these past months? "My shift ends in 20 minutes, she found herself saying. "I have a first aid kit at home. Can you hold on until then?" He nodded weakly, and Madison helped him to a booth in the corner, away from prying eyes. She brought him water and kept watching him between serving the few other customers, noting how his eyes darted to the windows whenever headlights passed by. When her replacement arrived, Madison made a decision that would alter the course of her life, though she didn't know it then. She helped the stranger to her car, a beaten-up Honda Civic that had seen better days, and drove through the rain-slicked streets to her small apartment in Dorchester. The building's elevator was perpetually broken, so they climbed 3 flights of stairs slowly, the stranger leaning heavily on her shoulder. Inside her apartment, with its mismatched furniture and water-stained ceiling, Madison's cheeks burned with embarrassment. But the man didn't seem to notice the shabby surroundings, collapsing onto her worn couch with a grateful sigh. Under the better lighting of her apartment, Madison could see him clearly for the first time. Despite the dirt and blood, his features were striking. Strong jaw, dark hair peppered with grey at the temples, and eyes that held depths of intelligence behind their current haziness. His clothes, though ruined, were clearly expensive, making him seem even more out of place in her humble home. She cleaned his wounds carefully, noting how he flinched at her touch, not from pain, but as if human contact was something foreign to him. The cut above his eye wasn't as bad as it had looked, and the rest appeared to be mainly bruises. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice carrying a richness that spoke of boardrooms and power, even in its weakened state. You didn't have to do this. Madison smiled slightly as she applied the last butterfly bandage. Maybe not, but someone once told me that kindness matters most when it's hard to give. Her mother's words, spoken during her final days in the hospital when they both knew the end was near but still found reasons to smile. He studied her face for a long moment, as if trying to solve a puzzle. "What's your name?" "Madison," she replied, packing up the first aid kit. "Madison Carter." He opened his mouth as if to respond, then seemed to think better of it. Instead, he just nodded, his eyes already growing heavy with exhaustion. Madison brought him a blanket and pillow, knowing she should probably be more worried about having a stranger in her home. But something told her this man wasn't a threat, at least not to her. Whatever danger lurked in his world, it seemed far removed from her simple life. "Get some rest," she said softly. "We can figure everything out in the morning." But when the morning sun streamed through her windows, the couch was empty, the blanket was folded neatly, the pillow placed on top. Only the blood-stained gauze in her trash bin proved she hadn't dreamed the whole encounter. Madison stood in her living room, staring at the vacant couch, and felt an inexplicable sense of loss. She'd helped him without expecting anything in return, but now she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had slipped through her fingers. With a sigh, she gathered her things for another day of work. The eviction notice crinkled in her pocket, a harsh reminder that good deeds wouldn't pay her rent. As she locked her door, she tried to push the mysterious stranger from her mind. After all, in her world, fairy tales didn't exist, and random encounters in the middle of the night didn't change lives. She had no way of knowing just how wrong she was. Madison's feet ached as she climbed the stairs to her apartment 3 days after the strange encounter. Her double shift had stretched into a triple when Lucy called in sick, and all she wanted was to collapse into bed. But as she reached her floor, she stopped short. Her landlord, Mr. Romano, stood outside her door, examining a piece of paper with a puzzled expression. "Miss Carter," he called out when he spotted her. "I was just looking for you." Her heart sank. A soft knock at her door made her jump. A delivery man stood outside with an enormous basket of food, fresh fruits, vegetables, artisanal bread, and other luxuries she hadn't been able to afford in months. The card attached simply read, "Thank you for your kindness. A." The next few days passed in a blur. Madison went through the motions at work, serving coffee and taking orders, while her mind churned with questions. She found herself studying every customer who walked through the diner's doors, hoping to see his face again. But he remained absent, leaving only the echo of his presence in the mysterious improvements to her life. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Randy commented one evening as she stared absently out the diner's windows. The rain had returned, turning the street into a mirror of shimmering lights. "Maybe I have," she murmured, then shook herself. "Just tired, I guess." But it wasn't fatigue that had her distracted. It was the growing sense that her life had somehow slipped sideways into an alternate reality. Small changes kept appearing. Her ancient coffee maker replaced by a sleek new model, a warm winter coat hanging in her closet that she definitely hadn't bought, even a set of professional cookbooks she'd once mentioned wanting to her mother. The gifts were thoughtful but not extravagant, chosen with a precision that somehow made them more unsettling. Whoever was behind them knew not just her needs, but her desires, the little dreams she'd set aside in the face of survival. "You should be careful," warned Bethany, her closest friend and fellow waitress, when Madison finally confided in her. They sat in a quiet booth during their break, sharing a plate of fries. "This is how horror movies start, you know. Mysterious benefactor, unexplained gifts. It doesn't feel threatening," Madison argued, though she understood her friend's concern. It feels, I don't know, like something from a fairy tale. Bethany snorted. Honey, we work the graveyard shift at a diner in Boston. We don't get fairy tales. But even as she said it, a sleek black car pulled up outside the diner's windows. Madison's heart stuttered as a tall figure emerged, silhouetted against the rain. Even before he stepped into the light, she knew. The man who walked through the door bore little resemblance to the broken stranger she'd helped that night. His suite was immaculate, his presence commanding. Heads turned as he made his way to the counter, but his eyes were fixed solely on Madison. "Hello, Madison," he said softly, and despite the elegant exterior, she heard the same rich voice that had thanked her in her apartment. "I believe I owe you a proper introduction." The diner had fallen silent, every eye on them. Madison's throat felt dry. "You disappeared," she managed to say. A shadow of regret crossed his face. "I did. I'm sorry for that. I'm Adam Donovan, and I'd very much like to explain if you'll let me." Behind her, Bethany made a choking sound. Madison didn't understand her reaction until later, when she learned that Adam Donovan was one of the most powerful men in the country, his face a regular fixture in business magazines and news programs. But in that moment, all she saw was the vulnerability beneath his confident exterior, the same lost look she'd glimpsed that rainy night, now carefully hidden behind a mask of success. "I'm working," she said, gesturing to her apron and the half-full coffee pot in her hand. "When do you finish?" 2 hours. He nodded, settling onto a stool at the counter. "Then I'll wait, if that's all right. And Madison?" A small smile touched his lips. "I'll have a coffee, please. Black." The next 2 hours were the longest of Madison's life. She moved through her tasks automatically, hyper-aware of his presence. He sat quietly, working on a laptop, occasionally glancing up to watch her with an expression she couldn't quite read. The other customers whispered and stared, phones discreetly capturing photos. Madison overheard fragments of conversation. "You're CEO of Donovan Corp, worth billions. What's he doing here?" When her shift finally ended, she found him waiting by the door, holding an umbrella. Outside, a driver stood next to the black car, but Adam shook his head when the man moved to open the door. "Would you walk with me?" he asked Madison. "There's somewhere I'd like to show you." She should have said no, should have gone home to her newly comfortable apartment and forgotten about fairy tales and mysterious strangers. But as she looked up into his eyes, she saw something that made her hesitate, a hint of the same loneliness she carried in her own heart. "Okay," she said, stepping under his umbrella. "Show me." Eviction deadline was today, and she was still short on rent. She'd been avoiding him, hoping for a miracle that hadn't come. "Mr. Romano, I can explain." "Explain what?" He held up the paper. "I got a wire transfer this morning. 3 months' rent, paid in advance." He squinted at her. "You didn't tell me you had a rich uncle." Madison stared at him, uncomprehending. What?" "The payment came from some investment firm. Thought maybe it was family looking out for you after everything with your mom." He shrugged, already turning toward the stairs. "Anyway, you're good through July. And hey, they fixed the elevator finally. About time, right?" Madison stood frozen. Outside her door, long after Mr. Romano had disappeared downstairs. A wire transfer? She had no family left, no rich uncle hiding in the wings. The only person who came to mind was the mysterious stranger from that night. But that was impossible. She hadn't told him anything about her financial situation, and besides, how would he even know where she lived? Inside her apartment, more surprises awaited. The water stain on her ceiling was gone, replaced by fresh paint. The window that always stuck shut now slid open smoothly. Even the temperamental radiator hummed contentedly, spreading even warmth through the small space. "This isn't happening," she whispered to herself, sinking onto the couch, the same couch where he had slept. She pulled out her phone, checking her bank account with trembling fingers. Her eyes widened. The negative balance was gone, replaced by a sum that made her breath catch. Not life-changing money, but enough to clear her mother's remaining medical bills and give her a small cushion. They walked in comfortable silence through the empty streets, the rain creating a private world. Beneath the umbrella, Madison was acutely aware of Adam's presence beside her, the subtle scent of his cologne mixing with the crisp night air. After a few blocks, he guided her toward the waterfront, where the city's lights danced on the dark harbor. "I used to come here to think," Adam said, stopping at a secluded viewing point. The rain had tapered to a gentle mist, and he closed the umbrella. Before everything changed. "Before what changed?" Madison asked, wrapping her arms around herself against the chill. Without a word, Adam shrugged off his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The warmth of it enveloped her, along with that same subtle cologne. "Before I learned that success was a double-edged sword." He leaned against the railing, his profile sharp against the city lights. "The night we met, I'd just discovered that my closest friend and business partner had been orchestrating a hostile takeover of my company. He'd spent years earning my trust, all while plotting to destroy everything I'd built." Madison's breath caught. "What happened?" "I confronted him at a board meeting. He denied everything, of course, but I had proof." Adam's knuckles whitened on the railing. "What I didn't know was that he'd hired people to take care of the problem. They followed me from the office, forced my car off a side road. I managed to escape, but—" He touched the spot above his eye where the cut had been. "I was disoriented, paranoid. I couldn't trust anyone. Then I saw your diner, this beacon of light in the darkness." "And you trusted me?" Madison asked softly. "A complete stranger." Adam turned to face her, his eyes intense. "You had every reason to ignore me, to call the police or an ambulance. Instead, you took me into your home, cared for me, expected nothing in return. Do you know how rare that is in my world, Madison? True kindness without agenda?" She thought about her mother, about all the lessons of compassion she'd taught her. "Kindness shouldn't be rare." "No," he agreed. "It shouldn't be, but it is. That night showed me something I'd forgotten. That genuine goodness still exists. You reminded me of who I used to be, before I let power and success harden me." Madison processed this, trying to reconcile the vulnerable man from that night with the powerful figure before her now. "The gifts," she said, "the rent, the repairs. A poor attempt at repayment." He smiled slightly. "I hope you'll forgive the presumption. I had my assistant do some research, learn about your situation. I know about your mother, the medical bills." A flash of anger cut through her. "I don't need charity." "It's not charity, Madison. It's gratitude." He stepped closer, and she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "You helped me when I had nothing to offer, when I was just a beaten man in a ruined suit. Let me help you in return." "I don't belong in your world," she said, stepping back. The jacket slipped from her shoulders, but Adam caught it before it could fall. "I serve coffee for a living. I live in a tiny apartment in Dorchester. Your driver probably makes more than I do in a year." "You think I care about any of that?" Adam's voice was gentle but firm. "Madison, I've spent years surrounded by people who want something from me. Money, power, connections. Everyone has an angle. But you gave without wanting anything. In return, that's worth more than all my company's assets combined." A group of late-night revelers passed nearby, their laughter carrying across the water. Madison watched them disappear into the darkness, buying time to steady her racing thoughts. "Why did you come back now?" "Because I couldn't stop thinking about you." The simple honesty in his voice made her heart skip. "Because every meeting I sat through, every decision I made this past week, I kept wondering what you would do, how you maintain your compassion in a world that so often punishes it. It's not always easy, she admitted. Some days I wonder if Mom was wrong, if kindness really does matter in the end. Tell me about her. The question surprised her, but something in his expression told her he genuinely wanted to know. They found a bench overlooking the harbor, and Madison found herself talking about her mother, the small acts of kindness she performed daily, how she turned their tiny apartment into a haven for neighborhood kids who needed a safe space, the way she faced her illness with grace and concern for others until the very end. Adam listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that showed he was truly engaged. When Madison's voice cracked, describing her mother's final days, he quietly offered his handkerchief. "She sounds remarkable," he said when she finished. "Like mother, like daughter." Madison dabbed at her eyes, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to dump all that on you. Don't apologize for having a heart." He hesitated, then added, "Would you have dinner with me tomorrow night?" The sudden shift surprised her. "Dinner? Nothing fancy, unless you want fancy. Just dinner. A chance to talk more without the rain and the late hour." His smile held a touch of uncertainty that seemed at odds with his powerful persona. "I'd like to know you better, Madison Carter." She should say no, should maintain the safe distance between their worlds, but looking into his eyes, she saw something that resonated with her own loneliness, a hunger not for success or status, but for genuine connection. "Okay," she found herself saying, "but not anywhere too expensive. And I'm not letting you send a car for me." His smile widened. "How about I cook for you instead? I have a place not far from here, away from prying eyes and expectations. Just us, good food, and honest conversation." The intensity of his gaze made her pulse quicken. "You cook?" "Another secret about Adam Donovan," he said, standing and offering her his hand. "I make a mean risotto." As they walked back toward the diner where his car waited, Madison felt a curious mix of excitement and trepidation. She was stepping into unknown territory, but somehow it felt right. The city seemed different now, transformed by shared confidences and unexpected connections. When they reached his car, Adam opened the door for her. "Let me drive you home?" Madison hesitated, then nodded. As they pulled away from the curb, she caught a glimpse of their reflection in the window, the waitress and the billionaire, an unlikely pair brought together by a simple act of kindness on a rainy night. In the distance, dawn was beginning to break over Boston Harbor, painting the sky in shades of hope. "Tomorrow at 7?" Adam asked as they reached her building. 7, she agreed, finding herself smiling. "Don't forget the risotto." He waited until she was safely inside before driving away. Madison climbed the stairs slowly, her mind replaying every moment of their conversation. When she reached her apartment, she found a small package outside her door. Inside was a cookbook titled Classic Italian Cuisine, with a note that read, "In case you want to fact-check my risotto claims tomorrow." Madison laughed, shaking her head at his thoughtfulness. As she got ready for bed, the sun rising outside her window, she realized something had shifted inside her. For the first time since losing her mother, she felt truly seen, not for what she lacked or what she could offer, but for who she was. The fairy tale was becoming real, and Madison wasn't sure whether to embrace it or run from it. But as she drifted off to sleep, still wrapped in the lingering scent of Adam's cologne, she knew one thing for certain: her life would never be the same. Madison stood before her closet at 6:30 p.m., surrounded by discarded outfits. The cookbook Adam had given her lay open on her bed, its pages revealing the complexity behind making perfect risotto. She'd spent the afternoon studying it, partly out of curiosity, partly to calm her nerves about the evening ahead. "You're overthinking this," she muttered to her reflection. She'd already changed 3 times, finally settling on a simple navy dress she'd bought for her mother's funeral but hadn't worn since. The memory gave her pause, but somehow it felt right, like her mother was with her on this important night. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "The door code is 2187, top floor. Looking forward to seeing you." She'd insisted on taking the tea to his place, refusing his offers of a car service. If they were going to explore whatever this was between them, she needed to do it on her own terms. The address he'd given led her to a converted warehouse in a quiet corner of the Seaport District. The building looked understated from the outside, but the lobby's elegant minimalism spoke of discreet luxury. Her heels clicked on the marble floor as she made her way to the private elevator. The doors opened directly into Adam's penthouse, and Madison's breath caught. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the harbor, now painted in sunset colors. But what drew her attention was Adam himself, standing at a sleek kitchen island, sleeves rolled up as he stirred something that smelled divine. He looked different in casual clothes, more approachable, yet somehow no less commanding. He glanced up at her arrival, and his smile made her heart flutter. "You look beautiful," he said simply, setting down his wooden spoon. "You look—" She gestured at his casual attire. "Different. Good different or bad different? Just different." She moved closer, inhaling the aromatic steam rising from the pot. "So, you weren't lying about the risotto?" "I never lie about food," he said seriously, then broke into a grin. "Wine?" She nodded, and he poured her a glass of something that probably cost more than her weekly salary. The kitchen was clearly designed for someone who loved to cook, all professional-grade equipment and thoughtful touches. "I didn't expect—" She gestured around the space. "A CEO who cooks?" He resumed, stirring the risotto. "It's my therapy. In the kitchen, success depends on patience and attention to detail. No shortcuts, no delegating, just honest work and its rewards." Madison leaned against the counter, watching him work. "Is that what attracted you to business initially? The rewards of honest work?" A shadow crossed his face. "Once upon a time, before I learned that the business world rarely rewards honesty." He added a ladleful of stock to the rice. "That's part of why I wanted to cook for you tonight. Here in this kitchen, there's no pretense, no power plays or hidden agendas, just food, conversation, and maybe a chance to be myself." As they cooked together, Adam insisting she help with the final steps of the risotto, Madison found herself relaxing. They fell into an easy rhythm, moving around each other in the kitchen as if they'd done this 100 times before. He taught her the secret to perfectly creamy risotto, and she shared stories about the chaos of diner cooking during the midnight rush. When they finally sat down to eat, the sun had set completely, leaving the city lights to twinkle below them. Like earthbound stars, the risotto was indeed perfect, rich with parmesan and white wine, studded with wild mushrooms. "This is amazing," Madison said after her first bite. "Though I'm not sure I should tell you that. Your ego seems healthy enough already." Adam laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his whole face. "Brutal honesty. That's what I like about you, Madison. You see right through the facade. Is that what this is about?" She gestured between them. "Finding someone who sees the real you?" His expression grew serious. "Partly. But it's more than that. You don't just see me. You make me want to be better. That night, when you helped me without question, it reminded me of who I used to be, before success made me cynical." "And who was that?" "Someone who believed in people, in their capacity for goodness." He topped off their wine glasses. "Someone more like you." Madison felt her cheeks warm, and not just from the wine. "You barely know me." "I know enough." His eyes held hers. "I know you work double shifts to make ends meet, but still find time to help elderly customers cut up their food. I know you keep extra coffee tokens in your apron to give to homeless people who come in from the cold. I know you took care of your mother through her illness without ever losing your compassion for others. She stared at him. How do you... I told you I had you researched. At her frown, he added quickly, not to invade your privacy. I needed to know you were real, that the kindness you showed me wasn't an aberration. And what did your research tell you? That you're extraordinary. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. And that I'd be a fool not to pursue whatever this is between us. The touch sent electricity through her arm, but Madison forced herself to think clearly. Your world is so different from mine, Adam. The media attention alone. Let me worry about that. His fingers intertwined with hers. Just be here with me now, in this moment. Before she could respond, a sharp, buzzing sound cut through the atmosphere. Adam's phone vibrated across the table, the screen lighting up with an urgent message. His expression darkened as he read it. Problems? Madison asked, trying to ignore the way her hand felt cold when he pulled away. Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow. But she saw the tension return to his shoulders, the CEO mask slipping back into place. I'm sorry, I promised no business. Tonight. It's okay. It's part of who you are. She smiled softly. The man who cooks risotto and the man who runs an empire, they're both you. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. You really do see me, don't you? The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Then Adam's phone buzzed again, more insistently this time. Madison saw him struggle with the decision to check it. You should get that, she said gently. It seems important. He hesitated, then picked up the phone. As he read the message, his face hardened into lines of concern. I'm so sorry, but I need to make a call. It's about the situation with my former partner, the one I told you about. Of course. Madison stood, gathering their plates. I'll clean up while you deal with it. But as she moved to the kitchen, he caught her hand. Madison. His voice was low, urgent. Promise me you'll stay. There's still so much I want to talk about. She squeezed his hand. I'll stay. As Adam disappeared into his home office, Madison began cleaning up, trying not to think about the contrast between his world and hers. In the polished surfaces of his kitchen, she caught glimpses of herself, the waitress playing at Cinderella, the boundary between their worlds as clear as glass. But then she remembered the way he looked at her, the honest vulnerability in his eyes when he cooked, the genuine connection they'd forged over a simple meal. Maybe the boundary wasn't as solid as it seemed. From the office, she heard Adam's voice rise in controlled anger. Whatever was happening in his world, it was serious. Madison dried her hands, moving to the windows to watch the city below. Somewhere out there, her small apartment waited, with its worn furniture and familiar comforts. But here, in this gleaming penthouse with its stunning views and complicated man, she felt something she hadn't expected. Possibility. The question was, would that possibility survive contact with the real world? The next morning, Madison woke to a flurry of text messages from Bethany. Turn on the news right now was followed by a string of exclamation points and a link to the Boston Globe's website. Her stomach dropped as she clicked the link. There, splashed across the digital front page, was a photo of her and Adam walking together under his umbrella. The headline read, Donovan Corp CEO's mystery woman. Who is the waitress who captured Boston's most eligible bachelor? The article was filled with speculation and half-truths. They'd somehow discovered her name and workplace, describing her as a humble diner waitress who had ensnared one of Boston's wealthiest men. There were quotes from anonymous sources suggesting she was a gold digger who had orchestrated their meeting. Her phone rang. Adam. "I'm so sorry," he said before she could speak. "I should have warned you this might happen. Are you okay?" Madison stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, trying to recognize herself in the woman the article described. "I don't know. It's surreal. I can have my PR team handle it. Release a statement." "No," she cut him off. "That would just make it more real." She took a breath. "Maybe we should cool things off for a while, give the media something else to focus on." There was a long pause. "Is that what you want?" The question hung in the air. Madison thought about the previous night, how natural it had felt cooking with him, the way he looked at her like she was something precious, the connection that seemed to defy their different worlds. "No," she admitted softly, "but I'm not sure I'm ready for this level of scrutiny." "Then let me help you navigate it. Have dinner with me again tonight. We can talk about everything, figure it out together." She should say no, should retreat to the safety of her anonymous life, but the warmth in his voice made her want to be brave. "Okay," she said, "but this time I cook for you. At your place. Unless you're afraid of slumming it in Dorchester." His chuckle warmed her. "I'll bring the wine. And Madison, don't read any more articles. They don't know you or us." Us. The word echoed in her mind as she got ready for work. There was an us now, something fragile and new that the world seemed determined to examine under a harsh spotlight. The diner was buzzing when she arrived. Several customers held up phones as she passed, not even trying to be subtle about taking her picture. Randy gave her a sympathetic look from the kitchen. "Ignore them," Bethany advised during their break. "They'll find something else to gossip about soon enough." But it wasn't that simple. Throughout her shift, Madison felt the weight of curious stares, heard the whispered conversations. A group of college girls came in just to point and giggle. One bold customer asked if she could take a selfie with Donovan's girlfriend. It was a relief when her shift ended, even though she knew she'd have to brave the small crowd of paparazzi that had gathered outside. She was pulling off her apron when a familiar face appeared at the counter, but not the one she'd been hoping for. "Well, well," drawled a voice she hadn't heard in 2 years, "if it isn't Boston's newest celebrity." Madison's blood ran cold. Nathan Brooks looked exactly as she remembered, handsome in a predatory way, with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Their relationship had ended badly after she discovered he'd been stealing from the diner's register while working as a line cook. "What do you want, Nathan?" He slid onto a stool, that familiar smirk playing on his lips. "Can't a guy congratulate his ex on moving up in the world? Though I have to admit I'm hurt. If you were into rich guys, you could have just said so." "I'm not into anything," Madison snapped, "and you need to leave." "Come on, Maddie, we had something good once, remember?" He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Maybe we could catch up, talk about old times. I bet the tabloids would love to hear some stories about the real Madison Carter." The threat in his voice was clear. Before she could respond, a deep voice cut through the tension. "Is there a problem here?" Adam stood in the diner's doorway, his presence filling the space. He'd clearly come straight from the office, his suit impeccable, his expression hard as he assessed the situation. Nathan's smirk faltered slightly. "No problem, just catching up with an old friend." "Former friend," Madison corrected, moving around the counter to stand beside Adam. "And he was just leaving." Adam's hand found the small of her back, a gesture both protective and possessive that made her heart race. Nathan looked between them, calculation visible in his eyes. "Sure, I'll go, but this isn't over, Maddie. We have a lot of history to discuss." He stood, adjusting his leather jacket with exaggerated care. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Donovan. You've got yourself quite a catch. There, hope you know what you're getting into." The moment Nathan left, Madison felt her knees go weak. Adam guided her to a booth, his face tight with concern. "Who was that?" he asked quietly. "My ex. A mistake from 2 years ago." She told him about Nathan's theft, how he'd tried to blame her when he was caught, the weeks of harassing phone calls before he finally gave up and disappeared. Adam's jaw clenched. "I'll take care of it." "No." Madison touched his arm. "That's exactly what he wants, to cause trouble, to make himself relevant." She managed a small smile. "Besides, I thought you were coming over for dinner, unless a vengeful ex and a media circus have changed your mind." His expression softened as he looked at her. "Nothing could change my mind about you, Madison. But are you sure you're okay with all of this? The attention, the complications." She thought about it, really thought about it. The media attention was uncomfortable, and Nathan's reappearance was unsettling. But looking at Adam, seeing the genuine concern in his eyes, she knew her answer. "I'm sure about you," she said simply. "The rest, we'll figure it out together, right?" His smile was answer enough. As they left the diner together, braving the camera flashes and shouted questions, Madison felt surprisingly steady. Let them take their pictures, write their stories. They could speculate all they wanted about the waitress and the billionaire, but they'd never understand the real story. The simple truth of two people finding each other on a rainy night, connecting over risotto and honesty, choosing to be brave together. But as Adam helped her into his car, she caught a glimpse of Nathan watching from across the street, his expression dark with promise. Something told her this was just the beginning of the complications their relationship would face. The smell of garlic and herbs filled Madison's small kitchen as she put the finishing touches on her grandmother's lasagna recipe. She'd spent the afternoon preparing it, letting the sauce simmer slowly while she cleaned her apartment for the third time. Not that Adam had seemed to care about the humble surroundings during his first visit, but that had been different, an emergency, not a planned date. A knock at the door made her heart jump. When she opened it, Adam stood there in casual clothes. Again, a bottle of wine in one hand and a small bouquet of wildflowers in the other. "I know you said just bring wine," he said with a slight smile, "but these reminded me of you, beautiful without trying to be." The simple sincerity of the compliment made her blush as she accepted both gifts. Smooth talker. "Only when I mean it." He followed her into the kitchen, inhaling deeply. "Something smells amazing." "Family recipe," she said, arranging the flowers in her mother's old vase. "Mom always said food tastes better when it comes with a story." Adam moved behind her, his hands settling lightly on her waist. "Tell me the story?" The warmth of his touch sent shivers through her, but she managed to keep her voice steady as she told him about summer Sundays at her grandmother's house. All the cousins helping to make pasta from scratch, the way her mother had adapted the recipe over the years. As she talked, his arms wrapped more fully around her, his chin resting on her shoulder. "I wish I had memories like that," he murmured. "My childhood was all boarding schools and formal dining rooms." Madison turned in his arms, studying his face. "No wonder you learned to cook. Food should be about connection, not formality. Is that what this is?" His eyes held hers. Connection. Instead of answering, Madison stretched up and kissed him. She'd meant it to be gentle, exploratory, but the moment their lips met, something electric passed between them. Adam's arms tightened, pulling her closer as the kiss deepened. She felt the solid strength of him, the barely contained power that had nothing to do with his wealth and everything to do with the man himself. The oven timer's shrill beep made them jump apart. Madison's cheeks burned as she hurried to rescue the lasagna, very aware of Adam's presence behind her. "Perfect timing," she managed to say, her voice only slightly unsteady. "It needs to rest for a few minutes anyway." Adam cleared his throat. "Should we open the wine?" They busied themselves with wine and table settings, the air between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. But just as they were about to sit down, Adam's phone buzzed. His expression darkened as he read the message. "Bad news? My former partner," he said grimly. He's making moves against some of our smaller subsidiaries, trying to force a crisis, and—" he hesitated. "And there's a photo circulating of us just now in your kitchen. Someone in the building must have taken it through the window." Madison's stomach dropped. She moved to the window, suddenly conscious of the eyes that might be watching. The fire escape outside provided a perfect vantage point for ambitious photographers. "I'm so sorry," Adam said, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I should have thought about—" "Stop apologizing." Madison drew the curtains firmly shut. "This is my home. I refuse to let them make me feel unsafe in it." But even as she said it, she knew things had changed. Her small apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt exposed. The simple pleasure of cooking for someone she cared about had been turned into tabloid fodder. "We could go to my place," Adam offered. "It's more secure." "No." Madison set the lasagna on the table with more force than necessary. "They don't get to win. They don't get to decide where we can and can't be together." She took a deep breath, trying to calm her anger. "Now, are you going to let your lasagna get cold while you worry about business, or are you going to let me feed you?" The tension in his face eased slightly. "Feed me. Definitely feed me." They ate by candlelight, the drawn curtains creating an intimate atmosphere that almost let them forget about the world outside. Adam praised the lasagna with genuine enthusiasm, asking questions about the recipe that showed his cook's understanding of technique. Madison found herself relaxing despite everything, drawn into discussion about their favorite comfort foods and cooking disasters. But reality intruded again with another buzz of Adam's phone. This time, he didn't even check it. "I should have turned it off," he said, reaching for the power button. "Don't." Madison touched his hand. "Your company needs you. You need me too." The simple declaration made her heart twist. "I need you to be who you are," she said carefully. "And part of that is being CEO of Donovan Corp. You can't just ignore it because of me." "I've been thinking about that." He set the phone down, his expression serious. "What if I stepped back a bit, delegated more, took some time to focus on what really matters?" "Adam, no." Madison shook her head. "You can't reshape your whole life around us. It's too soon, too much pressure." "Then what do you suggest? Because I'm not willing to lose you, Madison. Not to media pressure, not to corporate politics, not to anything." The intensity in his voice both thrilled and frightened her. "Maybe we just take it one day at a time, figure out how to balance both worlds?" Before he could respond, a sharp knock at the door made them both freeze. Madison moved to answer. But Adam caught her arm. "Wait," he said quietly. "Nathan knew where you live. Let me—" Another knock, more insistent this time. Then a familiar voice called out, "Madison, it's Bethany! Open up, it's important!" Madison relaxed slightly, though Adam remained tense as she opened the door. Bethany burst in, her face flushed. With excitement or worry, Madison couldn't tell which. "Have you seen—" Bethany stopped short at the sight of Adam, her eyes widening. "Oh, sorry to interrupt, but—" She thrust her phone at Madison. "You need to see this." Madison took the phone, Adam reading over her shoulder. It was a social media post from Nathan, accompanied by what looked like old photos of Madison at parties. The caption read, "The innocent waitress isn't what she seems. Stay tuned for the real story about Madison Carter." "There's more," Bethany said grimly. "He's been messaging other people from back then, asking for dirt. And rumor has it he's already talked to at least one tabloid." Madison felt the room spin slightly. The photos weren't particularly scandalous, just normal college party shots, but she knew Nathan. He would twist everything, turn innocent. Moments into sordid implications. "I'll handle it," Adam said, his voice hard. "I'll have my lawyers—" "No." Madison handed the phone back to Bethany. That's exactly what he wants. The more officially you respond, the more credibility it gives him. So we just let him spread lies about you. We let him show everyone exactly who he is. Madison squared her shoulders. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm not ashamed of my past. And I'm not going to let him make me act like I am. Adam studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, we do this your way, but promise me you'll let me help if things get worse? I promise. She managed a small smile. Now, are you going to try the tiramisu I made for dessert, or are we letting Nathan ruin that too? As they returned to their meal, Madison felt Adam's eyes on her, filled with a mixture of admiration and concern. She knew things would get worse before they got better. Nathan was just the beginning. There would be more scrutiny, more attempts to drive them apart. But looking at Adam, seeing the way he respected her decisions even when every instinct probably told him to take control, she felt stronger. They were building something real, something worth fighting for. Let the world throw what it would at them. Together, they could handle it. She just hoped she was right. The headlines grew worse over the next week. Nathan's exclusive interview painted Madison as a calculating social climber with a history of targeting wealthy men. The photos he'd released were manipulated to look more suggestive than they were, accompanied by quotes from supposed former friends who didn't even exist. Madison tried to maintain her composure, but the constant attention was wearing her down. Customers at the diner either stared openly or whispered behind their menus. Someone had leaked her phone number, leading to endless calls from reporters and anonymous threats. She'd had to change her number twice. You don't have to keep working here, Adam said one evening as they sat in his penthouse. He'd insisted she stay with him after someone tried to break into her apartment, probably just a zealous photographer, but it had shaken her. I know you value your independence, but what? Madison set down her tea with more force than necessary. I should hide away. Let them think Nathan's right about me being after your money. Adam ran a hand through his hair in frustration. I don't care what they think. I care about your safety, your peace of mind. And I care about not losing myself in all this. She moved to the windows, watching the city lights below. Even from this height, she could see the photographers camped outside the building. The diner's the one place I still feel like me. He came up behind her, his reflection joining hers in the glass. You're still you. Nothing they say can change that. Isn't it already changing? She turned to face him. I'm living in your penthouse, being driven around in your cars, wearing clothes your stylist picked out, because it's not safe at your apartment right now, and the clothes were just a suggestion for the charity gala. The charity gala I don't want to attend. You don't have to. His voice was carefully neutral, but it would send a message that we're not hiding, that we have nothing to be ashamed of. Madison studied his face, seeing the strain there. She knew this was affecting his business too. Some conservative board members were questioning his judgment. His former partner was using the scandal to approach investors, suggesting Donovan Corp needed new leadership. I'll go, she said finally, but I wear what I choose, and we do it my way. His relief was palpable. Whatever you want, He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. I hate seeing what this is doing to you. She leaned into his embrace, drawing strength from his solid presence. I knew dating you would be complicated. Dating. There was a smile in his voice. Is that what we're doing? Well, I'm not sure what else to call living in your penthouse and arguing about charity galas. He pulled back slightly, his expression suddenly serious. I can think of a few things. Before Madison could respond, his phone rang, the special tone he'd set for board member calls. She stepped away, letting him answer it. From his terse responses, she could tell it wasn't good news. When he hung up, his face was tight with anger. They're calling an emergency board meeting. Harrison's been talking to more shareholders. claiming my personal distractions are compromising the company. Madison felt her stomach drop. Harrison was Adam's former partner, the one who'd orchestrated the attack that brought them together. "When's the meeting?" "Tomorrow morning." He reached for her, but she stepped back. Maybe I should go back to my apartment, just until things calm down." "Madison, no, that's exactly what they want." "Is it, or do they have a point?" The words hurt to say, but she forced them out. "Your life was stable before me. And company was thriving. Now everything's chaos because you what? Showed me kindness. Made me remember there's more to life than quarterly reports." He moved closer, cupping her face in his hands. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." She wanted to believe him, but looking into his eyes, seeing the worry there, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was destroying everything he'd built. "I need some air," she said, pulling away. "I'm going for a walk." "I'll come with you." "No." She grabbed her coat from the rack. I just need to think, please." He didn't try to stop her as she left, though she knew it cost him. The private elevator rode smoothly down to the lobby, where his security team waited discreetly. She nodded to them, accepting their presence as a necessary evil. Outside, the autumn air was crisp with coming winter. Madison pulled her coat tighter, walking quickly past the photographers who scrambled to follow her. She had no destination in mind, just a desperate need to move, to breathe, to figure out how her life had become this complicated. She found herself heading toward the harbor, where she and Adam had first really talked. The photographers kept their distance. Adam's security team made sure of that, but their presence was a constant reminder of how much had changed. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "Hope you're ready for tomorrow's story. Adam's shareholders will love this one." Madison's hands shook as she blocked his number yet again. Another would probably appear tomorrow. He seemed to have an endless supply of burner phones. She reached the harbor viewing point, the same spot where Adam had told her his story. The city lights sparkled on the dark water, beautiful and distant, like the life she'd had before, simple maybe, but hers. "Quite a view, isn't it?" The voice made her blood freeze. She turned to find Harrison watching her from a few feet away, immaculate in an expensive coat. Adam's security team tensed, but Harrison held up his hands. "Just a friendly conversation," he said smoothly. "After all, we should know each other better, don't you think? Since you're having such an impact on my old friend's life." Madison straightened her spine. "I have nothing to say to you." "No? Not even if I could make all this go away?" He gestured vaguely at the photographers in the distance. The media attention, the scandal, the damage to Adam's reputation, it could all disappear for the right price. "You're trying to bribe me to leave him." Harrison smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. "I prefer to think of it as a business opportunity. You must have noticed how all this attention is affecting him, the board's concerns, the shareholders' doubts." He shrugged elegantly. "Adam's a brilliant CEO when he's focused, but lately his priorities seem divided." Madison felt sick, but kept her voice steady. "If you think I'm going to help you hurt him, hurt him! I'm trying to save him, save the company we built together." Harrison's voice hardened. "He's not thinking clearly. This infatuation with you, this attempt to play at normal life, it's putting everything at risk. You must see that." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a call from Adam. Harrison smiled again. "Think about it, Miss Carter. For Adam's sake, if not your own." He handed her a business card. "My private number. When you're ready to discuss terms, call me." He walked away, leaving Madison clutching the card and fighting back tears. When she finally answered Adam's call, her voice was surprisingly steady. "I'm fine," she said before he could speak. "I'm coming back now." But as she walked back through the city streets, Harrison's words echoed in her mind. Was he right? Was she really destroying everything Adam had worked for? The card felt like it was burning a hole in her pocket. She should tell Adam about the conversation, about Harrison's offer, but something held her back. Maybe because deep down she was afraid Harrison had a point. Maybe because, for the first time, she was seriously wondering if loving Adam meant having to let him go. The charity gala was everything Madison had dreaded and more. The Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and Bostons, elite, all of whom seemed to be watching her with barely concealed curiosity. She'd chosen a simple black dress, elegant but understated, yet still felt painfully conspicuous. "Stop fidgeting," Adam murmured, his hand warm against her lower back. "You look beautiful. Everyone's staring. Let them." He guided her smoothly through the crowd. "They're just jealous that I have the most genuine person in the room on my arm." But Madison could hear the whispers as they passed. Most were too polite to be openly hostile, but their judgment was clear in sidelong glances and whispered comments. She caught fragments. "Can't be serious about her. Obviously after his money. What would his father think?" Harrison's card seemed to burn in her clutch, where she'd kept it for the past 3 days, unable to either use it or throw it away. She hadn't told Adam about the encounter. Every time she tried, she remembered Harrison's words about Adam's divided priorities. "Ah, Adam." A silver-haired man approached them, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "And this must be the young lady we've heard so much about. Madison, this is Robert Chen, our lead counsel." Adam made the introduction smoothly. "Bob's been with the company since my father's time." Madison offered her hand, noting the slight hesitation before Robert took it. "It's nice to meet you." "Indeed." Robert's gaze was evaluating. "I understand you work at a diner, is it?" "Pete's, yes. Going on 3 years now." "How interesting." He turned to Adam. "I hoped we might discuss the Richardson proposal just for a moment." Adam's jaw tightened slightly. "Tonight's about the children's hospital, Bob. Business can wait until Monday." Of course. Though given recent developments, some of us are concerned about delays." Robert's smile remained fixed. "The board meeting this morning was quite illuminating." Madison felt Adam tense beside her. The emergency board meeting had lasted hours, and though he'd assured her everything was fine, she'd seen the strain in his eyes when he returned. "If you'll excuse us," Adam said firmly, steering Madison away. "I believe they're about to begin the auction." But they'd only made it halfway across the room when another group intercepted them, board members and their wives, all eager to size up the woman causing such controversy. Their questions came wrapped in politeness, but barbed with implications. "And what are your plans, dear? Surely you won't continue waiting tables now. Have you given any thought to going back to school? Adam's Foundation has such wonderful scholarship programs. It must be quite an adjustment, moving from your background to all this." Madison handled each interaction as gracefully as she could, but she felt increasingly like an exhibit on display. Adam stayed close, his protective instincts obvious in the way he tried to shield her from the worst of it. But she could see the political calculations happening around them, the way each interaction was weighted with implications for his company. During a brief moment alone, she excused herself to the powder room. In the elegant marble bathroom, she gripped the sink and tried to steady her breathing. The woman in the mirror looked like a stranger, polished and proper, but with fear in her eyes. The door opened and 2 women entered, their voices carrying clearly. "Can't believe he brought her. What is he thinking?" "Harrison says the board's losing confidence. This whole situation is becoming untenable." Poor Adam. First that business with his father's death, now this. He's not thinking clearly. Madison slipped into a stall, her heart pounding. She'd known Adam's father had died suddenly 2 years ago, but he rarely spoke about it. Something in the women's tone suggested there was more to the story. When she returned to the ballroom, she found Adam in intense conversation with several board members. The discussion looked heated, though they all maintained careful smiles for the watching crowd. "Everything okay?" she asked when he rejoined her. "Fine." But his voice was tight. "Harrison's been busy. Apparently, some of our major shareholders are threatening to pull their support unless we make leadership changes." Madison felt sick. "Because of me?" "No, because Harrison's been waiting for any excuse to make a power play." Adam ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "He's using our relationship to suggest I'm unstable, unreliable, bringing up my father." "What about your father?" Adam's face closed off slightly. "It's complicated, the way he died. There were questions about company decisions made during that time. Harrison helped me weather that storm, kept things stable during the transition. I thought he was protecting me, but now I wonder if he was just waiting for the right moment to use it against me." Before Madison could respond, Robert Chen appeared again. "Adam, I hate to interrupt, but the Richardsons are threatening to pull out of the merger. We need to discuss this now." Madison watched the war on Adam's face, his desire to stay with her battling his responsibilities to the company. She made the decision for him. "Go," she said softly. "I'll be fine." He searched her eyes for a moment, then kissed her quickly. "I'll be right back." But he wasn't. The quick discussion turned into an hour of intense negotiation in a side room. Madison endured the continued scrutiny alone, feeling increasingly out of place among the glittering crowd. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She found Adam still deep in discussion with his board members, Harrison now among them. The sight of his satisfied smile made her decision clearer. She touched Adam's arm gently. "I'm going to head home." He looked up, distracted. "What?" "No, wait. I'm almost done here." "It's okay. You have more important things to handle." She managed a smile. "I'll see you later." As she walked away, she heard Harrison's smooth voice. "You see, Adam, she understands. Business has to come first." Outside, the night air felt clean after the stifling atmosphere of the ballroom. Madison's hand trembled as she pulled out her phone and the card she'd been carrying. She stared at Harrison's private number for a long moment. A text from Nathan popped up. "Ready for tomorrow's bombshell. Hope Adam's ready to explain some interesting financial decisions from Daddy's final days." Madison's vision blurred with tears. Everything was falling apart. Adam's company, his reputation, the life he'd built. And it was all because of her. She dialed Harrison's number before she could change her mind. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting. "Miss Carter, I was hoping you'd call." Madison took a shaky breath. "What are your terms?" She could hear the satisfaction in his voice as he named a figure that made her head spin. Enough money to live comfortably for the rest of her life in exchange for walking away from Adam completely. "And of course," Harrison added smoothly, "your public statement will need to take full responsibility for the relationship's end. Paint yourself as the gold digger they already believe you to be. It will help Adam save face with the board." Madison closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the choice before her. "I'll need time to think." "Don't take too long. Nathan's story hits tomorrow morning. Once that breaks..." He let the threat hang unspoken. "Sometimes love means knowing when to let go, Miss Carter. For everyone's sake." The call ended, leaving Madison alone on the hotel steps. Behind her, the gala continued in all its glittering perfection. Ahead lay a decision that would break her heart either way. She thought of Adam's face when he cooked for her, the way he looked at her like she was precious, all their quiet moments of genuine connection. Then she thought of his distracted expression tonight, the strain in his eyes, the way his company was suffering because of their relationship. A car pulled up, one of Adam's drivers, already attuned to her habits. As she slid into the back seat, Madison made her choice. She would protect Adam the only way she could. She would break both their hearts to save him. Madison spent the night packing, each item she placed in her suitcase, feeling like another piece of her heart being torn away. The penthouse was quiet. Adam was still dealing with the crisis at the office. She texted him that she was tired and going to bed, buying herself these precious hours alone to do what needed to be done. Her hands shook as she wrote the letter, trying to make her lies convincing. Adam, I can't pretend anymore. The truth is, I'm not meant for your world, and we both know it. Harrison's offering me a way out, and I'm taking it. Don't blame yourself. This was always about money. I just didn't expect it to hurt so much in the end. Please don't try to find me. It's better this way. Madison. The words felt like poison, but she forced herself to write them. Harrison had been clear. Make it believable. Make it cruel enough that Adam wouldn't chase after her. Make him believe she'd been playing him all along. She left her key on top of the letter, placed carefully on the kitchen counter where he would find it. The same counter where they'd cooked together, laughed together, fallen in love. The memory of those moments threatened to break her resolve. Her phone buzzed, Harrison's message confirming the arrangements. A private car would pick her up in 10 minutes, take her to a hotel where she would make her public statement in the morning. The money would be transferred immediately after. The thought of the money made her sick. She'd already decided to donate, most of it to the children's hospital Adam's gala had been supporting. Let something good come from this betrayal. She was about to leave when her phone lit up with another message, Bethany this time, with a link to an urgent news alert. Madison's heart stopped as she read the headline. Donovan Corp scandal, CEO's father's death, linked to corporate cover-up. The article was devastating. Nathan had apparently found proof that during Adam's father's final days, major company assets had been moved around suspiciously. The implications were clear. Either Adam's father had been embezzling, or Adam himself had taken advantage of his father's declining health to seize control. Madison's hands trembled as she scrolled through the article. The details were too specific, too well-researched. This wasn't just Nathan's revenge, this was Harrison's master plan. He'd waited until Adam was vulnerable, distracted by their relationship, then struck with everything he had. Her phone rang. Adam. She let it go to voicemail, tears streaming down her face. The timestamp on the article was just minutes ago. He must have just seen it. Another call, this time from a number she didn't recognize. When she answered, Harrison's smooth voice filled her ear. I trust you've seen the news, Miss Carter. Rather unfortunate timing. You planned this, she whispered. You've been planning it all along. Business is chess, my dear. You have to. Ian thinks several moves ahead. His voice hardened. Now our arrangement becomes even more crucial. Adam needs a distraction from these allegations. Your betrayal, while painful, will give him sympathy from the board. They'll rally around him. After I help him weather this storm, of course. You're a monster. I'm a businessman. And you're running out of time to make your choice. He paused. The car is waiting downstairs. Either you're in it or tomorrow's headlines will be even worse for Adam. I have more evidence, more damaging proof. His father's death was complicated. Does Adam really need those details made public while he's fighting for his company? Madison closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her decision crushing her. I'll be there in 5 minutes. She hung up before he could respond, her mind racing. The pieces were falling into place. Harrison's long game, the way he'd manipulated everything. He'd probably been the one feeding Nathan information, using him as a pawn, just like he was using her. She looked around the penthouse one last time, memorizing the place where she'd been happiest. Then she pulled out her phone and dialed. Bethany. I need your help, and I need you to get a message to Adam, but not until tomorrow morning." Her friend listened as Madison explained what she needed. When she finished, Bethany was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure about this? It's dangerous." "I'm sure." Madison wiped away her tears, straightening her spine. "Harrison's right about one thing. Business is chess, and sometimes you have to sacrifice a piece to win the game." She took one last look at the letter on the counter, then picked it up and tore it to shreds. In its place, she left a single line: "Trust me. M." The private car was waiting when she reached the lobby. The driver held the door open, his face expressionless. Madison slid into the back seat, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. Harrison had taught her something valuable. In chess, the most powerful moves often involve misdirection. He thought she was sacrificing her love to save Adam. He was wrong. She was sacrificing everything else to prove that love was worth fighting for. As the car pulled away from the curb, Madison sent one final text to the burner phone Bethany had given her. Everything was in motion now. By this time tomorrow, either she and Adam would have lost everything, or Harrison would learn that he wasn't the only one who could think several moves ahead. She just prayed Adam would understand why. She had to do it this way. The car turned toward the expensive hotel where she would make her statement, where reporters were already gathering. Harrison would be waiting, ready to spring his trap. He thought she was walking into it blindly, another pawn in his game. But Madison had learned something else from Adam. Sometimes the most devastating moves come from the pieces you underestimate. She touched the recorder hidden in her jacket pocket, lifted her chin, and prepared herself for the most important performance of her life. Tomorrow would change everything. She just had to survive tonight. The press conference room at the Four Seasons was packed when Harrison led Madison to the podium. Camera flashes created a storm of light as she stepped up to the microphones, her face carefully composed into what everyone expected to see: a guilty woman preparing to confess. Harrison stood to the side, his satisfaction barely concealed. He'd scripted her statement himself, each word designed to destroy her reputation while salvaging Adam's. The perfect sacrifice to distract from the growing scandal about his father's death. Madison took a deep breath, unfolding the paper he'd given her. Then she set it aside. "My name is Madison Carter," she began, her voice steady. "And I'm here to tell you a story about kindness." Harrison's smile faltered slightly. 3 months ago, I helped a stranger who was hurt and afraid. I didn't know he was Adam Donovan. I didn't know about his company or his wealth. I just knew someone needed help. The reporters leaned forward, sensing this wasn't the confession they'd expected. "That act of kindness changed my life. Not because it led to romance, though it did. Not because it brought me into a world of wealth and privilege, though it did that too." She looked directly into the cameras. "It changed my life because it showed me that even in a world where everything seems to be about power and money, simple human decency still matters." Harrison moved forward, but Madison continued before he could stop her. "Last night I was offered a choice. Take money to walk away from Adam, to lie about our relationship, help create a scandal big enough to distract from other stories. Stories about corporate manipulation, about a dying man's last days being used for profit, about years of carefully planned betrayal." The room erupted with questions. Harrison's face had gone pale. "I have proof," Madison said clearly, her hand touching the recorder in her pocket, "of every conversation, every offer, every threat, including detailed discussions of how Adam's father's declining health was used to transfer assets to set up this very moment, but not by Adam." The doors at the back of the room burst open. Adam strode in, flanked by Robert Chen and 2 other board members. His eyes found Madison's, and the love and pride in his expression gave her strength. "Mr. Harrison," Robert's voice cut through the chaos, "I believe we need to have a conversation. The SEC is particularly interested in some recordings they've received." Harrison's composure cracked. "You can't prove—" "Actually," Adam said, "quietly we can. Madison wasn't the only one gathering evidence. She just gave us the final pieces we needed." He moved to Madison's side, taking her hand. "Ready to finish this?" Together they watched as security led Harrison away. The reporters were in a frenzy, shouting questions about corporate espionage, about Adam's father, about their relationship. But Madison focused on the warmth of Adam's hand in hers. "I got your note," he murmured. "Trust me, shortest and best love letter I've ever received. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the plan. We needed his confession to be genuine. You risked everything. Your reputation, your safety." "No." She squeezed his hand. "I risked everything else to save what matters most." The next hour passed in a blur of statements and revelations. The full story emerged. Harrison's years of manipulation, his role in the elder Donovan's final days, his patient plotting to seize control of the company. The evidence Madison had gathered, combined with what Adam and the board had secretly compiled, was damning. Finally, they escaped to Adam's penthouse. The sun was setting over the harbor, painting the sky in colors of hope. Madison stood at the windows, remembering all the moments that had led to this one. "I've been thinking," Adam said, joining her at the window, "about what you said at the press conference, about kindness mattering." Having second thoughts? The opposite. He turned her to face him. "That night we met, you saved more than my life. You saved my soul, reminded me who I wanted to be." "And who is that?" "Someone worthy of you." He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small box. "Someone who knows that real wealth isn't measured in stock prices or board votes. It's measured in moments of grace, in acts of kindness, in love that makes you brave." Madison's heart stopped. As he knelt before her, "I had a whole speech planned," he said softly, "about how you've changed my life, how you make me want to be better, how I want to spend every day proving I deserve you. But really, it comes down to this. I love you, Madison Carter. Marry me?" The ring was simple and elegant, exactly what she would have chosen. But it was the look in his eyes that brought tears to hers. The same vulnerability she'd seen that first night, now transformed into strength through love. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." Later, as they lay tangled together on the couch, Adam asked, "What happens now?" Madison smiled, thinking of all the possibilities ahead. "Now we build something new, together. The board wants me to take some time off, reorganize the company's charitable foundation." He traced patterns on her arm. "I was thinking maybe we could start with a program supporting small diners that stay open late. Places where kindness still matters more than profit." "I like that." She turned to face him. "But first, I believe you promised to teach me the secret to perfect risotto." Adam laughed, pulling her close. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you too." Madison closed her eyes, breathing in the moment. "And Adam, I'm keeping my job at the diner, at least part-time. I wouldn't expect anything else." Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, and a gentle rain began to fall, just like the night that had started it all. But this time there was no fear, no uncertainty, just two people who had found each other through an act of kindness and built something beautiful from it. Sometimes fairy tales do come true, not because of magic or wealth or destiny, but because two hearts are brave enough to choose love, again and again, no matter what the world throws at them. And in the end, that's the greatest act of kindness of all. The end. That was a beautiful story, wasn't it? I hope you enjoyed it. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your Collaboration is very important to me.